and for her leadership and personal attention that she is giving and Commission is giving to this region and the Baltic Sea region strategy in particular. Of course, it's typical to say that whatever challenges we face, they usually go hand in hand with opportunities. And I think we made full use of the latter by trying to bring so many people together at this event, which is a challenging time for events, but still it is an opportunity to have so many of you gathered around the virtual table and able to discuss where we stand now and where we should be in 10, 20 or 30 years. John has already mentioned that we are in the city of Kaunas, that is second biggest city in Lithuania and will become a capital culture of Europe in 2022. So I hope I will see many of you, whom now I see only virtually in Kaunas, visiting the very rich culture program that this event envisages. But now let's turn to the Baltic Sea region strategy and the three keywords that are present on the name of this event. First being revitalize, sort of make it vibrant again, make the strategy vibrant again. Then recover, because we are all I don't know if we can say post-COVID, after COVID. We are still in COVID, unfortunately, in so many places and in so many ways. But this is not a situation where we were in the beginning of 2020, when that was brand new to us. This is different. We have learned quite a lot. We have tools, we have solutions, and we know how to manage our economies even going through this complicated situation of stress to our health system and stress to our usual life. So the word recover is not just a very sound word, but a realistic word in this respect. And the third word is recharge. And here we have a notion of greener and more resilient, again referring to COVID and other challenges we have, and more prosperous future for the whole region of Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea region is about synergies, solidarity, and cooperation. When we talk about synergies, these are synergies between national and regional level, different policy areas, different stakeholders. Solidarity is between partners in economic development, in climate-related issues, in challenges we face, such as pandemic or post-pandemic recovery. Cooperation in the multi-level framework of the whole range of policy areas, from culture or education to energy or transport, that are very important when we speak about Baltic Sea region and the strategy. This is a very deep-rooted culture of partnership. And this culture of partnership, I think, has the major impact, has contributed greatly to the management of COVID pandemic, something that we did together in European Union, for example, ordering vaccines and rolling out the vaccination strategy, but not only this, also learning from other countries on how to implement the solutions to one or another challenge that we had during COVID, from psychological from the feeling of the society, the psychological, emotional health, to logistical issues, deliveries, and other agenda issues that were important. So this culture of cooperation, of learning from others, I think is very important in this region. The EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region has all elements that are needed for the continuous progress. There are stakeholders, there is multi-level governance structure, and there is a long-standing tradition of cross-border cooperation, which is very important in this respect. On our way to successful implementation of the strategy, we need maybe more visibility and deeper sense of ownership, so that it would not be just a nice document to read, but also a way of living or important aspect of our day-to-day activities. And this can be said, I think, about most of the strategies that we have, from green transition to whatever digital transition. We must not only write the strategies, we must not only believe that they are right, but we must also own them. We must participate in them in our daily deeds, I would say. And it is important also that the region and where the strategy is implemented is also open for other partners to join, for partners who might be willing and interested in finding out common solutions for the common problems, in cooperating and working on the same issues. It is an open format. What is very important for European Union, but also for the strategy, is that the focus that we see so explicit in Resilience and Recovery Facility, the green transition and the digital transition, is becoming a pan-European agenda. And of course, this is also a very important aspect for the Baltic Sea region strategy, given that there are so many things, for example, in the area of transport or energy that has a very strong link to a European agenda of green transition and climate neutral economy. So I think we need to concentrate on the actions that would help us to deliver on this transformation and achieve those common goals that we have. The key of our success was and still remains the foundation on which we stand as countries. And these are, of course, the common values that we share. The democratic values, the values of liberal democracy, of freedom of press, rule of law, private property, which are a cornerstone, I think, of the whole idea of Europe or Western world as we know it, but also of the strategy of countries of the same values, of the same vision, of the same fundamentals. So I think this definitely adds up to the potential of deliveries on promises and on achievement of our goals. So I think we have so much to learn from each other. We have so much to share, and we have so many ways in making our region stronger and more prosperous. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a very impassioned defense of where we need to be as we move further into the digital and green age. And obviously this is a very complicated and complex region at the best of times. Trying to get everybody singing from the same hymn sheet is always a classic challenge. We'll actually segue directly into that and now hear from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen as she describes in a first keynote the EU's ongoing role in sustaining regional cooperation and on how we can try to draw those many parts closer together.
Prime Minister, dear Ingrida, thank you so much for the invitation. Excellencies, Prime Ministers, OECD Secretary General, distinguished guests. It's just 3 months that I had the pleasure to travel to Lithuania to announce the European Commission's green light on Lithuania's recovery plan. And together with Prime Minister Simonaitytė, we visited the site where a completely new energy storage system will be installed, with funding from our recovery plan Next Generation EU. This system is crucial for 3 reasons. The first one, it will store clean energy. For example, the energy produced by offshore wind turbines in the Baltic Sea. Second, it will connect Lithuania to the other Baltic states and to the European electricity grid. And third, it will make the Baltic region more resilient and more independent. And these are the very same priorities of the Baltic Sea strategy. Saving the sea and the environment, connecting the region, and creating prosperity. These have been the goals of Baltic cooperation in the last 12 years since the creation of this forum. And the new action plan of the strategy has an even stronger focus on climate action and cooperation with neighbors. I think this is great news. In fact, there is an almost perfect match between the Forum's agenda and the priorities in our recovery plan. If you look from green hydrogen to clean mobility for Baltic cities, or from building renovation to charging points for electric cars. When we launched Next Generation EU, we also agreed that member states should invest at least 20% in digitalization. We were positively surprised that most member states are investing much more. Lithuania and Latvia, for example, will build a 5G corridor along the Via Baltica motorway, and they will bring gigabit speed broadband to thousands of enterprises and institutions that need fast data connections to operate. Or take Estonia. Estonia will use the European money to construct the Rail Baltic Tallinn terminal. This cross-border project will be connecting the 3 Baltic capitals and countries with Poland and the rest of the Union. Europe's economy will emerge from this crisis more modern, more innovative, and more competitive. The Baltic Sea strategy and our recovery plan are built on the same idea. The closer our union, the greater our prosperity. So we have encouraged investments in transnational projects, such as international 5G corridors or joint investment projects on hydrogen. Cross-border cooperation is not just about economic growth. Think about what has happened at the border with Belarus since the summer. This is a hybrid attack to destabilize Europe. And Europe acted quickly. We will continue to stand together with Lithuania, Latvia, and Poland. At the same time, we have to ensure the protection of the rights of those people caught up in the middle. But as long as we do not find common ground on how to manage migration, our opponents will continue to target that. It is something we must always keep in mind when we talk about the Baltics' resilience against external pressures. The new Pact on Migration and Asylum has everything we need to build a balanced system. A system that protects our borders, but provides also refuge for those forced to flee. This is the time to act now, not just as individual member states, but as a union of 27, so that migration can never again be used to divide us. Europe succeeds when we join forces. And that's how we have moved forward on vaccines, on Next Generation EU, and on the European Green Deal. Standing together creates a level of resilience that no member state could achieve alone. And the people of Europe feel more and more that they belong to one united European family. This is particularly true here in the Baltics. And this feeling has grown even stronger in recent months when traveling across borders was harder. But European solidarity grew stronger than ever. I've heard recently a story that speaks volumes about the deep connection between European people. Just before the summer, a big art installation appeared in front of the Vilnius train station. It is called The Portal, and it's a large round video broadcasting live images with no sound. And there is another identical portal in the center of Lublin, in Poland. And the two installations are connected. So if you look into the portal in Vilnius, you might see a perfect stranger who's standing 500 kilometers away in Lublin, and he or she is looking into your eyes or waving at you. And even if you speak different languages and cannot hear each other, you will be connected and somehow united. I hope this week's forum can be an opportunity to expand cooperation between the different shores of the Baltic, with new projects and new ideas for Europe's future. And I thank you and let me wish you all a very fruitful forum.
Ursula von der Leyen, we just heard there, and very, very personal terms expressing the challenges that are being faced on a number of fronts, with migration perhaps being now employed as a potential hybrid weapon in an attempt to divide this region. But at the same time, there are so many positive statements and initiatives that have been coming out of the event here, that I think it's an important time to reflect on what the President has said for future discussion. Let's turn it over at this point and go over to Mathias Cormann, the OECD Secretary General, and give us his prospects for and their message of the OECD on to the Baltic region on facilitating a green-driven recovery. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's great to be here as part of the opening of this 12th annual forum for the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region, and to be here with EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and of course with the Prime Minister of Lithuania, Ingrida Šimonytė. The EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region is a great example of how you can shape the future of an important region like this one by connecting and enabling local communities. And President von der Leyen has just mentioned a very practical way of connecting local communities. As we are meeting here today all around the world, communities in countries all around the world continue to face serious challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Indeed, the pandemic is not yet over. The economic recovery is underway, and economic growth has picked up further this year, helped by strong policy support by governments around the world, the ongoing deployment of effective vaccines, though more needs to be done on that front, and indeed the resumption of economic activities as restrictions have eased. Global GDP has now surpassed its pre-pandemic level and is expected to grow by 5.7% this year. However, the pace of the recovery remains uneven across regions and the world and across sectors of the economy. And the outlook remains uncertain, with the biggest risk of further outbreaks of the virus, in particular if there was an outbreak with a variant resistant to the existing vaccines. In the OECD area, there are still around 8 million people more unemployed than before the crisis, and over 14 million more inactive people. That is a lot of families that still continue to suffer the practical consequences in their day-to-day lives and in terms of their livelihoods from this pandemic. Our mission then is to optimize both the strength and the quality of the recovery from the pandemic. And let me support here very strongly the statements of Prime Minister Šimonytė about the importance of our shared liberal democratic values when it comes to optimizing the strength and quality of that recovery. Individual freedom, democracy, our commitment to human rights, the rule of law, and market-based economic principles, which have stood the test of time. The focus of this forum on revitalize, recover, recharge could not be more timely. And the EU strategy for the Baltic Sea region will be an incredibly important part of accelerating the economic recovery by accelerating the green and digital transformation of this region. First, on fostering green growth. There is clearly strong and very commendable momentum across Europe with the decision to implement the Green Deal and move towards carbon neutrality. Together with the Next Generation EU Recovery Programme, the Green Deal will support stronger, cleaner growth and help reduce territorial inequalities across Europe. Fostering green investment in innovation and providing investment opportunities for European firms and entrepreneurs is an important part of this. Several key technologies are needed to achieve net zero by 2050, like low-carbon cement and steel, still require important investment to lower the cost of their production. The recovery provides a unique opportunity to redirect financial flows and invest in this transition to net zero. However, public sector financing will not be sufficient. Private sector investment will also be needed. And one of the very important factors when it comes to channeling increased private sector investment is to provide policy certainty around cost-effective, publicly supported climate strategies, which will then lead to an increased appetite by the private sector to boost investment and innovation, especially in green projects. Emissions-intensive sectors such as the electricity and transport networks, which collectively account for over 50% of total emissions on average across OECD countries, could benefit hugely from clear and stable policy frameworks. Greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector in the EU have been rising since the 2008 global financial crisis, and this is something that is particularly true across the Baltic region. To achieve carbon neutrality for the transport sector, regulatory tools and price incentives will need to work together at the same time as encouraging more systemic changes in mobility. The second area where the European strategy for the Baltic Sea region can make a difference to this region is by harnessing and further facilitating the digital transformation. Of course, the digital transformation was well underway before the COVID pandemic hit. But there's no question it has significantly accelerated during the pandemic all around the world. And that digital transformation brings many obvious benefits and opportunities, but it also comes with new and evolving challenges, risks, and disruptions. As policymakers, then, we need to ensure we maximize the benefits while better managing some of those associated challenges, risks, and disruptions. These include ensuring appropriate and equitable access to the necessary digital infrastructure, to investing in the necessary skills development, planning for the future of work, effectively addressing competition issues to ensure that we can maintain an appropriate level playing field, addressing cybersecurity, privacy, data flow with trust issues, and indeed the tax policy implications, as well as setting values-based standards, for example, on the use of artificial intelligence, to name just a few. Lithuania and countries across the Baltic Sea region have made and continue to make significant efforts to support the digital transformation of the economy. But more, we believe, could be done and should be done to drive innovation and productivity growth. For example, by boosting investment in research and development, addressing remaining broadband coverage gaps and digital skills shortages would help to further boost the adoption of advanced technologies across this entire region. To achieve trusted connectivity, as we also discussed at the Tallinn Digital Summit recently, we need to ensure it is genuinely human-centric and that everyone has the best possible opportunity to participate and benefit from the digital transformation of our economies and can be and feel safe in the digital world. Digital technologies have an enormous potential also to strengthen our economies and contribute to achieving carbon neutrality. Artificial intelligence, for example, can be applied to areas such as waste reduction, energy efficiency, and environmental monitoring, and can bring major benefits to our economies and to environmental outcomes. It can also accelerate scientific discovery and support policy decisions by enabling more complex models for climate predictions. During the pandemic, we observed a record jump in fixed broadband connections, and as the OECD's latest broadband data shows, Baltic Sea countries, notably Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, led the OECD on data consumption in 2020. Colleagues, friends, let me close in saying how optimistic I am in looking forward in the context of what is being discussed as part of this European strategy for the Baltic Sea region. It has enormous potential. Best wishes for a very successful forum.
Good. Thank you very much, Mattias Korman. And I think it's important here again to mention how important that message of free markets and democracy is linked. And of course, all of the efforts that are being made to try to drive the technology forward much, much deeper and faster. I would say here at this point that we are still hoping that we'll have some questions from you in the audience. I'll give you another reminder on that. Go to your Slido app and in the event code, put in hashtag EUSBR 2021. And otherwise, you can take it down from the QR code on your mobile devices. We're going to move on from here at this point, and we're still well in time. And I'm going to send this out now to Stockholm, and Swedish Prime Minister Löfven, Stefan Löfven out there. I'm assuming you can hear me. How has the vision, Prime Minister, evolved for a cohesive Baltic Sea since the strategy was unveiled? And then a possible follow-up I'll give off the back of that. But first, how has it evolved in your view?
Forum participants and dear friends of the Baltic Sea region, Excellencies, first let me thank the Lithuanian government and especially you, Prime Minister Ingrida Šimonytė, and also the city of Kaunas for hosting this. I think it's very good to be together with neighbors and friends on an issue like this. Well, as we all know, the pandemic has had major impact on health systems, but also on our economies, on our social systems, and our way of life overall. Many of us living in the Baltic region, the Baltic Sea region, have personally been affected by the pandemic. And with that in our mind, we have to learn from these experiences. Therefore, the focus this year, I think green recovery is very timely. We have an opportunity of a generation to build back greener, and we should take that. In this forum, we share a vision that a green transition in the Baltic Sea region is possible, very possible. We are all owners of the Baltic Sea strategy, and we all want to achieve its ambitious goals. And this sense of common commitment shared by public actors, private actors, as well as civil society is really encouraging, and I know also an inspiring example. Last week, I participated in a roundtable hosted by UN Secretary General Guterres and Prime Minister Johnson in preparation of COP26. We all urgently now need to step up climate action, and G20 countries in particular. The countries in the Baltic region can and should serve as an example of cooperation and also leadership on climate action by setting the right policies, by ensuring finance, and not least showcasing new innovative technology. By that, we can share the opportunities in the transition to climate neutrality globally. Next year, Sweden will take the chairmanship of the Council of the Baltic Sea States, and for Sweden, this is a priority. This regional cooperation is very valuable to the people in the region and for us together in the transition to a greener society when opening up and starting to meet again in real life. So together in this Baltic cooperation community, we can and we should lead by example. Together, we can reach our common goals to recover from the pandemic and recharge for the green and digital transition. Thank you.
Prime Minister, maybe one quick follow-up for you on that. When you connected that with the upcoming COP26 in Glasgow, what do you think should be and of course, in light of the fact you're taking over the presidency, eventually the US SBR, what is the message, do you think, if we could stand united here in the region? What is that message to COP26?
It means a lot because we need to be very clear in Glasgow that first we need to stick to the 1.5 degree. And I heard John Kerry saying last week that this is the opportunity for us, perhaps the last opportunity. So we need to stick to 1.5. We need to make sure that we can raise the $100 billion that we have promised before. And all these things matters and is really important. And if we as a region can stick together and push for that, of course, that means a lot. So I really think it's important for us to do so.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'd like to actually turn now to the Latvian Prime Minister, Krišjānis Kariņš, and ask, first of all, in terms of the development of Latvia cross-border with projects going on, where do you see the sticking points? I recognize we don't necessarily want to go into the negatives, but where do you see the sticking points in bringing about a more rapid transition? You talked earlier in recent times about e-services and connectivity. What is your assessment at the moment in terms of this ability to cohese faster?
Well, first of all, greetings to everyone, and greetings, Ingrid, and thank you very much for hosting and organizing this. I may have to disappoint you in terms of speaking about sticking points as in what's not working. I think maybe I'm just a downright optimist, but actually when I look at my country's development and the Baltic Sea region as a whole, I see lots of very positive aspects. I can agree with what Stefan just said and what Ingrid has said in her opening remarks. But what we have in the Baltic Sea region is a very dynamic region. We are somewhat different in terms of our economic development. The wealth of our economies is still somewhat different. But the general approach and the general policies, and I would say the mentality of our people is quite similar. So what we have is a lot of potential to go for these goals, and these goals that we have are best achieved through cooperation. So if I think about the climate and the green energy, it's the green cross-border projects which are important. So we have an offshore wind project currently with our northern neighbor, with Estonia, actually right coincidentally on the border of our two countries out in the sea. We have the regional project Rail Baltica, which is actually a very green project in terms of getting goods and passengers moving not so much on the road, but onto rail. We don't have the current the connections into Europe on rail, and we will have this. We have, I mean, if you think about another aspect on the digital aspect, again, it seems that regional, I mean, our main goal, I suppose, in the European Union is to get the single market also in the digital sphere. And this is a goal that I think that we all have to keep in mind, but I think there's a lot of potential also on a regional level and on solutions which are, how should we say, getting interoperability moving. So you mentioned at the outset of the project on the 5G networks along the Via Baltica, that's the north-south road corridor. If we get that system up and running, which is currently the goal, that is a fantastic thing for private enterprise to piggyback off of. So for example, you know, perfect tracing of goods transport, which would help everyone also in the economy. And to by improving the logistics, you end up, of course, consuming less energy because you can do things in a much more rational way. And regarding another aspect, in terms of resilience, and we think of regional cooperation, COVID-19 caught us out a little short regarding our resilience in terms of a crisis. So what we saw when the crisis, this pandemic hit, the first reaction of large parts of the world was get the borders back up and, you know, everyone for themselves. And what we found out, of course, is that in the European Union, we lacked at the time, a year and a half ago, the capacity to produce enough needed masks, you know, the personal protective equipment. And this realization that on the one hand, world trade is, of course, key. It's key to healthy economic development and the well-being of people around the world. At the same time, it's a question of when a crisis hits, are we prepared, I suppose we should say, for the next crisis? And what can we do, especially on a regional level, to make sure that we are more resilient in terms of, say, supply chain logistics, which are still, in today's world, we see that one of the drivers of inflation across the construction sector, among other things, are bottlenecks in that. So I think in terms of the climate and the green energy and the digital, and also in terms of our resilience, it's the regional cooperation, which I think has to be, we need to put at the forefront, but it is actually the regional cooperation, which is already working well in many regards. And I think that we have to think as leaders of our governments, how we can further that along.
Great. Thank you very much. And Prime Minister, maybe a follow-up. This has just come in from Jan via Slido, but I could easily address this as well to the OECD Secretary General. What tools could be used to increase country private sector responsibility while reaching the goals of the Baltic Sea strategy?
Country private sector responsibility. I understand all the words that you're saying. I'm not sure that I understand the thought behind the question. I'm oddly at a little bit of a loss, but maybe you could repeat the question again. I just didn't fully understand it.
I might have a stab at this. I mean, the motivation of the private sector, obviously is to be successful, to be viable, to be prosperous, the pursuit of profit. And in the end, the private sector in making investment decisions will assess risk, will assess opportunity to make a return. Right. And I mean, this is where I said, in my opening remarks, I mean, one of the things that across this region, across the EU more broadly, and indeed in a global sense, that we can do if we want to truly leverage private sector investment into the green recovery is to provide increased certainty in terms of the policy framework and the policy settings. I mean, we need to ensure that there is, to the greatest extent possible, a level of international coherence and a global level playing field, but we also need to ensure that in terms of the policy settings and the regulatory settings that seek to drive and incentivize behavior, that there's a level of stability and public support. If there is obvious public support and stability, I think that the private sector will invest in the opportunities that are clearly there.
Prime Minister Kariņš, perhaps you would like to come back in on that basis, if that has helped your understanding of the question.
No, perfect. I mean, if maybe it's not really what the question was, but certainly this theme is important. Look, what we have to understand is that all of climate policy in Europe is geared towards certainty for the private sector. So we have our goals. In a sense, if you're wondering what's the business model for this energy saving solution or some other aspect that would help us attain our goals, the answer is you have a guaranteed 450 million person market. So policy creates certainty. I completely agree with what Mr. Corman just said, certainty. And that certainly is what's going to be, and what already is driving investment. So of course, the private sector needs stability, and we as policymakers need to make sure that our policy is predictable for the long run, because the climate goals, these are not investments of 1, 2, or 3 years. These are investments for 20 or 30 or even more years. Yes. So if we have a stable framework, that's what we need to keep, a very stable framework, and the private investments will be coming as they're coming already, because some member states, especially if you look around the Baltic Sea region, we have extremely competitive companies worldwide that are making, coincidentally, lots of money off of the green change. So the Green Deal, even before the Commission now came up with this latest initiative. And this is clearly the direction we have to go, provide policy certainty for the private sector.
Okay, thank you very much. Prime Minister Kallas, if you're joining us now, I have a question actually again from the audience. Andres in Sweden asks how young people could contribute to the increased cooperation within the Baltic Sea region. Very broad question, but would you like to take a stab at that?
Yes, thank you, and thank you for all the previous speakers as well. Very many good thoughts. How to bring the young people on board? I think when you look at Europe and the Baltic Sea region, what is our strength is that, as Christianis already pointed out, we have a similar mentality here and similar general approach to things. And when we talk about the digital sphere, or we talk about technology and innovation, then I think we share this common approach in this region. And this is also very important for the young people. And to my mind, our vision for the coming years, maybe next 10 years, considering that we want to move faster in such subjects as environmental protection, but also digitalization, then our goal could be moving faster as a region, and maybe we could be the Silicon Valley of the European Union, because we share the same approach and same views. So maybe where majority or some parts of our European colleagues see risks, we see opportunities, as Ingrida pointed out, and that could be our strength also for being this kind of young and very dynamic region, considering this mentality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, as a follow-up, it's slightly changing the subject here. You had mentioned something earlier about the concept of trusted connectivity, which came out of the Talent Summit from earlier this month. Could you elaborate a little bit about what that means and how trust in that context is strengthened through the region?
Yes, thank you. Trusted connectivity is related to investments to infrastructure, but as every infrastructure currently has a digital element to it. So more and more there's a question of whom can we trust, and what kind of funds we can trust, and what kind of certificates we can trust. So everything is based on trust very much. So there is this global competition between democracies and autocracies regarding connectivity, and I'm not only talking about real infrastructure, but also digital infrastructure. So I think we have very many good cooperation projects in the Nordic region, in the Nordic Baltic region. We cooperate regarding digital identities. We move faster in some digital services that we provide here. We also should move with investments to infrastructure when we talk about climate, for example. We already develop mutual offshore wind park with Latvians, and we also need this electricity grid in the Baltic Sea region to connect all the offshore wind parks. So these types of connectivity projects are very specific and very concrete to our region when we talk about trusted connectivity.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Prime Minister Morawiecki, we haven't forgotten about you. I'd like to bring you in here at this point, perhaps off the back of what Prime Minister Kallas has just said. How is the concept of trusted connectivity understood in Poland at the moment, and what initiatives are you taking in your own way to drive that along?
Well, first, let me start by saying something which might be quite obvious, in particular for the Baltic strategy and our region, that there are many elements of our strategy which can be achieved only jointly because by the very nature of those things, they lie between different countries. And connectivity in a wider sense of this meaning, of course, what Kaya said was critically important, but I would add to this connectivity which we work on through infrastructure and through the 3Cs initiative, which is trying to connect our countries and disconnect from the previous Soviet Union systems. And by this, I mean enabling our countries, together with the Scandinavian countries, together with Sweden, Finland, and the others, to work on the same platform and to have a very good connectivity in the area of hard infrastructure, like our Via Baltica, Via Carpathia. These are two symbolic motorways which are going to enable trade big time from Finland down to Greece, the dimension which is non-existent today. If you saw how the lorries, how truck drivers have to transport their goods from Finland to Romania or to Hungary to Greece, you would be quite astonished. So it's very important that we truly see our region as a fantastic opportunity to develop our region even further. There was once a concept, Swedish concept, hostile to Poland and to Lithuania back then, 400 years ago, Regnum Maris Baltici, so the Baltic Sea as one connected, interconnected region. Today we have good chances to do so, to realize a concept of a real integration between our countries, and this is on the positive side. On the negative side, I have to say a few words about the elephant in the room, and this is one other neighbor which is has also connectivity to the Baltic Sea, and this is our eastern neighbor, huge country, which is not working on a peaceful strategy how to cooperate with us, but how to destroy peaceful cooperation. And this is why I believe that all sorts of nice strategies and projects have to be developed, but let's focus on first things first. And these are also all the aspects of hard security and you know, let's work together on this Hannibal ante portas.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Prime Minister. I want to actually ask this in the round. That also goes for my colleagues in the room here. What vision do you all respectively see for economic recovery in the Baltic Sea region, and how does it differ from that facing after the shocks that we faced in the 2008-2009 Great Recession? How have the dynamics fundamentally changed? And this is, of course, particularly interesting for the young people who already went through a terrible time trying to find work when we had the 2008 and 9 recession. Then the pandemic hit this time around, and there's still a lot of confusion and worry about whether they are going to be able to keep up. So I'd like to actually ask this question in the round. Would either of you like to take that one?
Well, I will try to, especially since I have a practice in both.
Yes.
I was in government in 2009, 2012, so that was, you know, one experience, and this is a completely different experience. And even starting from the crisis itself, because that crisis came from economic sphere. It came by a banking system. There were some imbalances in the economy, especially in the Baltic region. And this adjustment was a very severe adjustment. And none of us in the beginning was in Eurozone, which was an additional challenge, having, strong currency pegs to other currencies and trying to defend it. Then it takes a very big hit on this internal demand and level of prices, but also wages. And of course, other countries in the region like Sweden or Poland had a different story due to their monetary policy details. But what was different in that case, I think, there was a different approach from the European Union because there was rather a pressure on the member states to clean the mess themselves. And this is reasonable, but to some level counterproductive, because what you actually get, another round of pro-cyclical policy after a set of pro-cyclical policy. Because before there was a pro-cyclical policy of fueling economy, then you have a pro-cyclical policy of sort of cutting that even further. And this adjustment is really severe, and the outcome, as you mentioned, was in job losses and youth unemployment and whatnot. Of course, for our region, we were lucky because economies were quite flexible. So they came back to growth in a very short period of time, but still the losses were quite significant. In this case, the reaction of Commission was different, starting from the joint, and not only Commission, but European Union as a union, starting from the joint activities like, for example, orders of vaccine and rollout of vaccination for a practical reason, but also in terms of economy. Because the agreement of recovery and resilience facility, I would say this is a historical change. And understanding that we are in this together, and so all the countries have suffered to a different extent. Of course, the Lithuanian economy suffered a very minor loss, but some other member states have suffered a very significant loss. And there was an agreement that we are in this together, so we should find also a financial instrument for countries to sort of cope with this. And of course, the countries that suffered more will get a bigger chunk of money. The countries that suffered less, like my country, will get a decent amount of money to invest into very important spheres. But I mean, in comparison to EU budget, this is not a huge amount of money, but still. But what is very good that with this, we also have a EU prerequisites on the areas where you can spend money. You cannot just go around and spend money to pensions or teacher salaries or whatever is popular. There is a joint strategy, joint understanding of things that are important, green transition, digital transition, and so this lock on a cap on how much you are supposed to spend for this. I think when you speak about whole the region, the Baltic Sea region, but also the European Union, it will give a very significant synergy on the result.
I would like to pick up with Matthias Kormann on his comments, but before I do, I want to go back to Prime Minister Kallas and ask for her reaction. I realize that there's a youth element to two of my questions to you already, given the amount of impact, but the various factors that have changed over the years. How do you see this in terms of recovery as differing from that which we experienced 14 years ago?
Well, the crises are totally different. And first of all, when we look at pure macroeconomic sense, then our economy has already recovered. It's already higher than it was pre-crisis, if we talk about COVID crisis. Whereas, the financial crisis left some very deeper or so much deeper scars. And was much more difficult. What we did right during that time, during the financial crisis, is that we built the resilience on those lessons that we learned during financial crisis, and that allows us to use this recovery plan that we have currently in Europe. We wouldn't have that if it wouldn't have been for the lessons and the scars we got from the financial crisis.
Okay. Yes, we also have a... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matthias.
I might just jump in here. I mean, in summary, really, I mean, the fiscal policy support in response to this crisis has been unprecedented, and I think that has been a factor of this crisis. One, yes, lessons learned from the financial crisis, but also fiscal capacity built since the financial crisis. But the second one is the digital transformation is much further advanced. So people in this region have got a much better opportunity to do business and engage with people all around the world than what they did at the time of the financial crisis. Now that has great upside opportunity and great benefits, but it does come with a whole series of risks and implications that need to be appropriately managed. And in this part of the world, the digital transformation is going strongly, and I mean that is going to be a key to future economic opportunity and prosperity for this part of the world, no question. And the third thing that is, I guess, different to 2008 is that the need for urgent climate action is even more urgent than what it was then. And so these are three sort of, I guess, high-level factors that I think will drive policy considerations in the short term to put this region and other parts of Europe on a stronger foundation and trajectory for the future.
Okay, great. Prime Minister Kariņš, would you like to interject there? I recognize that there are some points here that you may want to pick up on.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that the first couple of responses I can only agree on. The way I see it, of course, that crisis and this crisis are of different orders. But last time around, in my country, it was impossible in any way to stimulate the economy because at the time, international money markets were basically closed off to our economy. We actually had to turn to our friends in the European Union for assistance. What we learned from that time is how to build a sounder financial and fiscal basis to be prepared for the next crisis. It turns out this is now the next crisis, which means we had the possibility to provide the economic stimulus that all of us have done. And just as with Estonia, my economy also in Latvia has recovered above pre-pandemic levels because we interjected about 9% of our budget into the economy. Unemployment would have gone well into the double digits if we had not had these furlough programs that we and pretty much everywhere around Europe we instigated. Our unemployment instead went from around 7% up to a little over 8%, and now it's down to about 6%. So by interjecting cash into the economy, we could overcome the short-term difficulties. But it's the European aspect which is providing the longer-term solutions. So first of all, vaccines. The fact that countries such as ours, as my own, which is relatively small, but we have access to the vaccines at the same price as Germany or France or Poland, attests to European unity and its benefit to all of our citizens, that our country is utilizing as much as all other countries in Europe. And the second is the Recovery and the Resilience Fund, which is a very far-sighted way to strengthen all of our economies. I guess you could say, for the next crisis. And as leaders of governments, we don't like the crises, but they seem to be somehow inevitable every 10 years or so. That somehow the cycle will be affected. And here, it's not only the EU, but also I agree with what was said on the area being more resilient also in terms of its digitalization and interconnectivity. Certainly during this crisis, our exporting sector across the board continued to grow unabatedly. There was no difficulty. We had, of course, as everyone, difficulties in tourism and in hospitality. But it is a different game, but it's because with this time around, there was a very good fit between the national responsibility and what we all did, and then the regional and the European opportunity, starting with the obvious like vaccines, but also the next generation EU funds that we're all investing into our futures. is a big part of it. And tying the next generation EU into climate goals is also very far-sighted. And that will mean that after this round of investments, we will be closer, not only we'll be closer to our climate goals. And of course, the secondary benefit will be much of this will be used in terms of regional interconnectivity. So it's like a win-win positive cycle on the back of a very tragic crisis.
Great, thank you. Prime Minister Morawiecki, let me pick up with you there. Again, coming back to the youth perspective, much of this forum is really devoted towards looking to the future, the concerns of youth, some of whom feel rather uncertain, first of all, about getting the vaccine. We still have a great number of those unvaccinated, but also those who are feeling perhaps left behind by the increase in economic activity. The indicators are going in the right direction generally, but youth unemployment, for example, remains stubbornly high in many areas. When you take the pulse of youth in Poland, what do you see when you compare 2008 to today?
I don't know if your statements relate to Poland, because we have the lowest unemployment level ever. We have the lowest unemployment amongst youth ever. And we have a very quick recovery recent days. And the same goes for the Visegrad group and for most countries around the Baltic Sea. So the recovery is really based on indigenous, to some extent, to indigenous forces, domestic forces. Export is growing very, very strongly. Foreign direct investments are coming big time, and we do not have any issues with this. One dimension which I would like to draw your attention to is this strategic autonomy discussion which we now undergo in the European Union, and a real problem which corporations have with lots of outsourcing and offshoring which they did over the previous 25 years. Now with COVID, many Western companies try to re-establish the production chains based on closer geographies. And here, Central Europe, including the Baltic Sea region and Poland, is in a particularly good position. And we see this already. I have every week a couple of meetings with investors from all over the world, and we see now the major issue in Poland, which is a shortage of a labor force, and this is a nice problem to have. It's an important and serious problem, but a nice one compared to the previous 30 years. That's about real economy. In the area of financial economy and public finances and so on, we have a healthy banking system, well capitalized, so ready to go in terms of additional credit action. And we have good situation in public debt and budget deficit criteria. We in Poland not as good as Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, but quite comfortable compared to the Western Europe. By comparison, in Western Europe, the total debt, public debt to GDP is around 100%. There are countries like Spain and France and Italy, not to say about Greece, where it exceeds 100% seriously. In case of Poland, it's around 50%. So quite in a good position, given that we have good growth. But let me be a little bit provocative and use your question and the previous round of very interesting voices to say that for the first time over the last couple of weeks, the European citizens feel a bad side of acceleration in climate policy. There is an increased pressure all over Europe on additional money for society, for in particular the vulnerable part of the society, to compensate for a sudden to some extent, artificial growth of the CO2 emissions, which is part of the cost of 1 megawatt hour of energy. So in the Baltic Sea, we have to take this into account as well, and this dramatic shift, which is now stimulated from Brussels and by Brussels, has to be somehow compensated and somehow complemented with additional strategy towards how to amortize this dramatic change and increase of cost of energy vis-a-vis our serious competitors from outside, like China, Russia, and India, and the United States in this case, and at the same time how to cater for the fears of our societies, and this is there are people who are scared by the dramatic increases of the energy prices. So this is another elephant looming on the horizon, which we will probably have to deal with pretty soon.
I have one final question before we come towards the concluding part of today's session to all of you, and that is, do we have the strategic vision on how the Baltic Sea region strategy could look in 2030 or 2040? And more crucially, is there political will there to get more strongly involved, where there's been the perception anyway in the past that it's been more at the expert technical level, but not enough driving the political side? And on here, I think I'll start with Prime Minister Kallas again to pick up on that.
Yes, thank you. Well, as I said before, what we see on the European level, there are several topics where the Baltic Sea region maybe is ready to move faster, and one part is digital, other part is climate topics that were discussed here as well. So I think we definitely need the strategy because we have a region that has and shares the same mentality and the same general approach as well. So as I said before, I think if in terms of the European discussions, there are things that we can agree amongst ourselves and move a bit faster when it comes to, I don't know, digital identities, for example, or trusted connectivity, these topics, then maybe we should move faster because it's beneficial for our citizens as well, and it could be the attraction for additional investments that we definitely need in this region. So I think these could be the steps and plans for the future.
Thank you. Let me just move over to Prime Minister Karinč again for a very quick response from all the rest of you, maybe 30 to 45 seconds on the vision thing. Is the vision thing doable at this point as far as where we are, 2021, for looking ahead 19, 20 years on what the Baltic Sea region strategy could look like?
For a short answer, I would say yes. And for a short word of it, I think the one key way to describe that is interconnectivity. If we work on all aspects of this, and there are both digital and physical aspects, I think it's a win-win. If you look in terms of climate policy, it's a win-win. And if you look in terms of our economic growth, it's a win-win. The Baltic Sea region is extremely competitive worldwide for attracting investment. The more interconnected we are, the more attractive the region will be for investments.
Okay, thank you. Prime Minister Morawiecki, your comment?
Yes, what's the question?
The question again is, as we look to 2030 and beyond, 2040, is there a strategic vision possible to be gleaned at this point? Are we likely to see a strong strategic vision that could be called unifying or clarifying? Even in some of the remarks that you had earlier on, clearly we're talking about different speeds in parts of the economy. How about a clear vision for
I'm
2040?
I'm not a major fan of strategic visions because I see such a rapidly changing environment around us, geopolitically and otherwise, that we have to maintain enormous level of agility. So I don't want to sound contradicting with what I just said, but yes, strategic vision, what we might have, but in this strategic vision, we have to embed, we have to anchor enormous flexibility at the same time. And to some extent, for many analysts and so on, for many bureaucrats, such a strategic vision can be an azimuth which is rigid lighthouse type of direction, and we have to maintain as much of flexibility as possible given the huge pressures around us. So yes and no at the same time is my answer.
Okay. I'm actually going to hold off asking that question to both of you here because we are coming to the end and having you make your final comments. Perhaps you could incorporate an answer to that in terms of where you see the vision going from here over the next 15 to 20 years, and to give perhaps for those who will be tuning in over the next 4 or 5 days some encouragement to see the possibilities arising from a more united, unified, cohesive strategy around the Baltic, which again I referred to in the metaphor from Willy Brandt earlier on in the session. On that basis, I'll turn over to you, Prime Minister Šimonytė, and then have you wrap that up for your side.
Well, I would say definitely yes, because in 2030, this region will be better connected and more resilient, because the projects, when you asked in the beginning, what is the difference between 2009 and now? I mean, what we were discussing rather on a conceptual level, the projects that we were somewhere visionary projects, are now very much ongoing. There are huge pieces of project of energy independence or transportation, Rail Baltica, that are up and running. And I think that most of the projects will be delivered on time, meaning that people will be more mobile, the region will be more resilient. With the RRF funding, we will be able to get synergies in green transformation, in digital transformation. I have no doubt there will be more joint projects, being that onshore, offshore, whatever, alternatives, or some other spheres where we are very much in the same mindset. Because what is important that it's not technical. I mean, the prime ministers, my fellow prime ministers, we meet very often, and this technical work by our experts, by our companies, by our ministries is very much supported by a political backing in trying to sort out issues that we face, in trying to have a joint advocacy vis-a-vis European Commission or whomsoever, other partners. So I think this is up and running. So in 2030, there will be a different region. I mean, in terms of prosperity, in terms of option for people to commit to work in one country and live in another, or have business in different countries and whatnot.
What do you see then the gap between what happened in 2008 until now, and from now until, say, 2030, 2040? Do you see a disproportionately faster acceleration?
Well, yes, because in 2009, I think all of us were more involved in how we clean the wounds of financial crisis. But yes, of course, some significant infrastructure projects were still undergoing, but this regional approach was, I guess, got the biggest progress in the recent couple of years, 5 to 7. So I think we are progressing enormously fast. There is a very strong political support to all those projects. These are projects not only for us, but also for European Union, because we are stronger, resilient, more prosperous, and able to deliver better services to our citizens, but also to citizens of European Union. And I think this will be a better connected and more vibrant region. It is already vibrant, but it will be more vibrant even in 10 years.
Matthias Kormann?
Well, look, listening to this conversation, I'm very optimistic about the future for this region. I mean, I hear great strategic alignment and great strategic clarity about what needs to be done in order to put this part of the world on the strongest possible foundation and trajectory for the future. I mean, in the end, what we all want is peace, stability, and prosperity, and we want prosperity that is environmentally sustainable and that is, I guess, optimized on the back, seizing the opportunities of the digital transformation. And of course, I mean, there's a security environment. There are all sorts of challenges at any one point in time, and of course, you maintain agility. But fundamentally, in terms of the overall strategic direction, I think there's great clarity and there's clearly great alignment and a great level of positive cooperation across the leaders in this part of the world and alignment with the European Union leadership. So given, if you know what you need to do and you're prepared to work together cooperatively, there's no limit to what you can achieve, and I'm very optimistic about the future.
I was going to say, given the coverage you have globally, how do you view this in comparison, this region compared to others in terms of the potential?
Well, look, different parts of the world face different challenges, and in this part of the world there's a great positive spirit of enterprise and of wanting to come up with innovative solutions to solve the evolving problems of our time in the best possible way. I mean, different parts of the world are facing different challenges. I think this is a very successful part of the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Very good. Well, as I said, we are coming up close now to the end of the session, and I did want to remind all of you who have contributed so far on Slido to continue to keep that work ethos active over the next 4 days. As I said, we have another session exactly at this time tomorrow at 1300 CET, and then again on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I would like to thank again here all of those who took part virtually under extremely challenging technical circumstances at times. It is really a great privilege that we've managed to assemble so many for this first opening session. And I think that there is grounds for optimism, great optimism, that the recovery and the resilience that's been shown in this region will continue, and that perhaps maybe from my side summed up by the concerns I have when I speak to so many youth in Western Europe and those in Central and Eastern Europe, is that there will be an opportunity to bring everyone along in this recovery, and that no one, as Willy Brandt said, should ideally or realistically be left behind. And so it is hoped that this strategy will actually continue to bear fruit, that we can demonstrate, that we can perceive, that we tangibly can feel the benefits of the investments that are being made now. I would like to say also thank you to those of you who have written in and have not yet received a reply. Don't worry, we will get to you in the course of the next few days together with our moderators. We won't leave you behind either. But until then, I wish all of you a successful time in your endeavors, and as well, we will be looking to, I actually wanted to remind you to connect to the other days of the forum via the dedicated website www.eusbsr2021.eu. And again, my warm thanks to the organizers, the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Kaunas City European City of Culture 2022, the Klaipėda City European Youth Capital 2021, and the Union of Baltic Cities. And personally, for me, to have had a chance to see such a spectacularly beautiful city with so much dynamism and promise, which I think is a metaphor and hopefully a great hope for the future going forward. We'll see you hopefully again this time tomorrow, 1300 CET. Until then, it's from all of us here. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.